Okay, welcome back dear friends. I am Dr. Kaleem Raza. Today in this video lecture we are going to discuss basically important definitions relating to the cardiovascular system. To understand the applied clinical physiology, first we have to understand that what is basically the systolic blood pressure, diastolic pressure, what is mean arterial pressure, what is the pulse pressure, what is the cardiac output, what is the stroke volume, what is the end diastolic volume, and what is the Frank's turning law, and what is the basically resting membrane potential. So in this video lecture we are going to discuss in conceptual way about all these basic important definitions relating to your CVS systems. So let's discuss first what is basically the resting membrane potential, RMP. As you know that basically cell membrane is covering each cell and it differentiates your extracellular environment from the intracellular environment, and this is basically made up of lipids, phospholipids and proteins. So resting membrane potential is basically the potential difference across the cell membrane measured in millivolts. Simple definition that RMP, the membrane potential, is basically the potential difference across membrane measured in the millivolts. Then next, what is action potential? Action potential क्या होता है? Action potential is basically the excitability. आप बड़ी बड़ी डेफिनेशंस देखेंगे बुक के अंदर. सिंपल याद रखें कि एक्शन पोटेंशियल क्या है? is a property of the excitable cells, excitability, like muscles in the nerve cells, in the neurons. और मोस्टली जो एक्शन पोटेंशियल है कैसी होती है? थ्रू द कंडक्शन ऑफ द सोडियम. So action potential is basically the excitability of the excitable cells. And then what is the threshold? ये भी आपने सुना होगा. Threshold क्या होता है? Threshold basically the point where action potential is inevitable. वो पॉइंट जहां पे एक्शन पोटेंशियल इनविटेबल होती है उसको क्या कहते हैं? थ्रेशहोल्ड. नेक्स्ट, another very important term, what is basically the systolic blood pressure. Systolic blood pressure is the blood pressure, highest arterial pressure. Remember, this is basically highest arterial pressure in the cardiac cycle. तो ये लिखना है आपने, highest arterial pressure during a cardiac cycle. During a cardiac cycle. And systolic blood pressure is measured when the blood is ejected by the heart into the systemic circulation. And what is the normal systolic blood pressure? 120 mmHg. ये हो गया आपका सिस्टोलिक ब्लड प्रेशर. और डायस्टोलिक क्या होता है? डायस्टोलिक बीपी, डायस्टोलिक ब्लड प्रेशर. दिस इज बेसिकली लोएस्ट आर्टेरियल प्रेशर ड्यूरिंग द कार्डियक साइकिल. ये भी याद रखना है, लोएस्ट आर्टेरियल प्रेशर ड्यूरिंग द कार्डियक साइकिल. और diastolic pressure is basically measured when blood is returned from your body, and now your heart is basically in diastole phase. After the end diastolic volume, after the preload, during the relaxation. And what is the normal basically diastolic BP is basically 80 mmHg. इसके बाद एक और वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट डेफिनेशन, व्हाट इज द पल्स प्रेशर? पल्स प्रेशर क्या होता है? Pulse pressure is simply the difference between systolic and diastolic blood pressure. So systolic is 120, diastolic 8. So what is the difference? 40. So क्या हुआ pulse pressure आपका? 40 mmHg. Next, another very important definition. What is the mean arterial pressure? What is the mean arterial pressure? MAP. Mean arterial pressure. What is the mean arterial pressure? Mean arterial pressure is basically diastolic pressure plus 1/3 of the pulse pressure. तो कैसे? diastolic pressure हमारे पास कितना था? 80 plus 1/3 of pulse pressure 13 equal to 93 mmHg. So this is the mean arterial pressure. एग्जाम में पूछा जाता है diastolic, how you are going to calculate diastolic pressure plus 1/3 of the pulse pressure. तो टोटल क्या बनेगा? 93. इसके बाद हम बात करते हैं कार्डिक आउटपुट की. कार्डिक आउटपुट क्या होता है? कार्डिक आउटपुट इज बेसिकली cardiac output is basically amount of blood ejected by the heart during 1 minute. इसको क्या कहेंगे? कार्डिक आउटपुट. तो आपका हार्ट 1 मिनट में कितना ब्लड पंप करता है? ऑलमोस्ट 5 लीटर पर मिनट. कैन यू इमेजिन कि आपका हार्ट 1 मिनट में 5 लीटर जो है वो ब्लड पंप करता है. So cardiac output is basically the volume of the blood ejected by the heart during the 1 minute. Okay, and then what is the stroke volume? Stroke volume is basically the volume of the blood ejected by left ventricle in one stroke. Remember the difference, please. That stroke volume is the basically amount or the volume of the blood ejected by left ventricle in single stroke. इसको क्या कहते हैं? स्ट्रोक वॉल्यूम. और इसके बाद एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम और प्रीलोड. व्हाट इज एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम और प्रीलोड? दैट अमाउंट ऑफ ब्लड. रिमेंबर दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट डेफिनेशन. एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम और प्रीलोड. एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम EDV. Or this is also called as preload. Amount of blood in your heart after diastole and before contraction. After diastole, write it down please. After diastole and before the contraction. This is called as end diastolic volume. आगे हम लास्ट पे बात करेंगे फ्रैंक स्टार्लिंग लॉ की. फ्रैंक, don't be so frank, okay? Frank Starling law. Frank Starling law. This law says, Frank Starling law, that if you will increase the end diastolic volume, or preload, it will ultimately increase the stretch of the myocardium. And then stretch of the myocardium will increase the contractility of your heart. So this is Frank Starling law. You have one or two questions in your exam from all these definitions we have discussed. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you.